show a video which will give you context of what the informal sector is, what are some of the interventions that can be taken before I call the esteemed panel to have a discussion on the topic.
India, a nation where 490 million people form its backbone. Who are they? They are the building blocks of our country. Our carpenters, plumbers, electricians, farmers, and many more. The country's informal workforce. Meet one of them. Here's Samar, a Delhi-based carpenter. He furnishes comfort, shapes heirlooms, and impacts lives. Yet he and the rest of our informal workforce are living on the fringes of India's AI revolution. Now imagine a future where AI and frontier technologies reach everyone, where Samar learns new skills through personalized AI paths, earns verifiable digital credentials that prove his expertise, and unlocks better jobs, fair loans, and financial dignity. Imagine a future where AI helps India's informal workforce work smarter and safer. With AI as a catalyst, India can leapfrog systemic barriers and achieve transformative outcomes to empower India's informal workforce with frontier technologies. Come, be a part of this AI revolution for all. Let us build a Viksit Bharat together.
So we are privileged to have a panel.
India.
We are privileged to have a panel today which represents industry, the development sector, and the government. You know, all of the ecosystem has to come together to solve for this problem. So may I now invite my first panelist, Ms. Arundhati Bhattacharya, Chairperson and CEO Salesforce India. She's the recipient of the Padma Shri, India's 4th highest civilian award, and has frequently been featured on Forbes' World's 100 Most Powerful Women and Fortune's World's 50 Greatest Leaders list. She is a strong advocate of responsible AI, inclusive technological adoption, and public-private collaboration for national growth. She is instrumental in expanding India's digital economy while embedding ethics, governance, and sustainability into technology ecosystems. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. Representing the development sector, we have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Aditya Nataraj, the CEO of Piramal Foundation. He's a prominent education reform leader and also the founder of Kaivalya Education Foundation and the Piramal School of Leadership. He's over 20 years of experience in the development sector, including a significant tenure with Pratham, driving volunteer-led literacy campaigns in rural India. He's been recognized as an Ashoka Fellow, an Echoing Green Fellow, and Aspen India Fellow. He's also the recipient of Times Now Amazing Indian Award in Education. Thank you, Aditya, for joining us. On the government side, again, I'm privileged to request Ms. Manisha Verma, Additional Chief Secretary, SEEIB, Maharashtra. She's a 1993 batch IAS officer who has contributed to drafting transformative regulations in India like the National Food Security Act, the Forest Rights Act, the National Food Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Right to Education, MGNREGA, and others. She's been felicitated by the Honorable President, the Honorable Prime Minister, Niti Aayog, Honorable Governor, and Honorable Chief Minister for various initiatives, and is also a recipient of Maharashtra Foundation Award for Outstanding Public Services. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. And to kick us off, I'm delighted to welcome Romal Shetty, CEO of Deloitte South Asia, to take the discussion forward. Thank you so much, Romal.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and always a privilege to have a wonderful panel here. So maybe I'll kick off first with you, Arundhati, to start with. As you know, when we did our study, obviously you and Aditya were significant contributors to that study. We've seen that the informal workforce basically faces about 5 really systemic roadblocks. One is being discovered and trusted. Second is getting some steady demand. Third is getting fair and timely payment. Then upskilling, that sort of translates into higher productivity. And of course, accessing protections, insurance and others. So how do you see these challenges playing out in the future, and what or which of it must be prioritized in the next 12 to 18 months?
So given the fact that ours is a very populous nation, I don't think we have a way other than a digital way of addressing these solutions. In the sense that you might have a worker, say a person who works as a plumber, who might be really, really good at his job, and there might be very good opportunities in his village or in the village next to his, but he has no idea that it exists. So this lack of knowledge is not something that you can manage to do away with unless you have some kind of a marketplace where people can put in not only their credentials and their experience, but also be able to access the opportunities that are there for their kinds of jobs. That's one piece. The second piece is that unless and until we put all of these people together, we would also not understand what is the upskilling that is required for such people. Because more and more as days go by, we are realizing that everything is changing. All of the technology is changing. And the change in technology is such that requires people to be further upskilled. Now, how do you get that upskilling? How do you ensure that you have a verifiable certification that you have gone through that upskilling? Again, you have got to come back to the digital area. Third is regarding getting payment on time, as you said. This is something, by the way, which is a very big problem across India. And it does not only impact your the blue-collared workers, it impacts even the MSMEs and the SMEs. And sadly enough, I would say it is the big corporates that are the worst at this, including the government. Means I cannot not include the government over there, because getting payments on time in India is something that is not considered to be at all important. It is one of the things that you do last. You have to do it, so you do it at some point of time. And this is not something that speaks well for us as a country. It really adds to the difficulty in doing business, because you're not funding people the moment that they need to be funded in. And there has to be an accountability for all of this, which unless if you use a digital platform, there is no footprint. There is no footprint about the delays that are taking place unless you put a digital platform to this. So I think, you know, in the report that we put out together, and I think there were other people, especially your people, Deloitte people, who did a lot of work on this, who actually suggested a platform where all of these things could be comprehensively addressed. Now, I was just asking Romil before coming in over here that India is great at putting out fantastic reports. At the end of the reports, who is charged with the execution? Who is really accountable? That if it doesn't get executed, there is a downside to it. We have no such, you know, downsides. We have suggestions, we have reports, and then we don't have a person who's charged with the execution. I think it's time for all of us to understand that reports are great, suggestions are fantastic, but there has to be an authority that will take charge of this, will run with it, and be accountable for actually implementing it, because there are some really, really good suggestions over there that need to be implemented.
Thank you, Arundhati, and you know why she was the SBI chairperson, because she's got a strong mind of her own and always, you know, willing to challenge the status quo, which I think in her own life, as well as, of course, in the various positions that she's held. Thank you, Arundhati. So, Manisha, a question to you now, and this is really about Maharashtra, you know, obviously. Could you sort of share an overview of the work being undertaken by your department for the benefit of all the delegates here, and how is it working towards enhancing human capital and social inclusion?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm looking forward for a great dialogue with this esteemed panel members as well as all of you. I head the Department of Skills, Employment, Entrepreneurship and Innovation. That is why it is written SEED, so it's not a very common kind of a department. This is a newly constituted department in Maharashtra, and to put it simply, it is overseeing the entire vocational education spectrum. So there is 1,000+ institutes, ITIs, government and private, which are the cutting edge, you know, they are the cradle of creating skilled workforce for the industries, manufacturing and service sector, but mainly the manufacturing. And so all the ITIs are under the department oversight. But we are also looking at short-term skilling programs through our Maharashtra State Skilling Society. So all the Government of India programs and the state budget resources for skilling. Then we have a state board of vocational education and training. So if you are a private provider of skill training, then the accreditation and recognition of the courses is done by our state board, and affiliation is also given, because today you know that there is lot of duping of people, ordinary people. There is no information as to whether the courses which are given in the market are actually accredited or have a value. So this body does the independent assessment of the training institutes and gives affiliation and recognition. And then to complete this spectrum of, because you know that the students from ITIs or from people who are doing vocational education, they might have aspirations for higher education and independently also. So we've recently set up a public state skills university, Ratan Tata State Skills University in Maharashtra. So that is also doing pretty well now, I mean in its infant stages. And then we have a Maharashtra State Innovation Society, which is under my department, which is looking at promotion of startups and incubators. So this is a whole spectrum of the work that we are doing. But not to miss out the vulnerable groups for social inclusion, we are also partnering with agencies to do skilling for jail inmates, prisoners in jail, people with disabilities, women, tribal areas and all. So that in brief is the work that we are doing.
Thank you, Manisha. Aditya, one of our core insights from our study was that productivity gaps often come from sort of inefficient workflows and tooling deficit rather than any work effort. So as we look to increase productivity 10x to really realize Viksit Bharat aspirations, what guardrails do you think should be in place so that technology augments workers, improves their safety and earnings, and does not really replace them altogether?
Yeah. So thank you very much for having me on this panel. It was great fun to be part of the committee at Niti Aayog as well, which put this together, thanks to Deloitte's efforts. I think when we're talking about this informal labor force, we're all imagining this electrician who's coming to our house, right? And so we're imagining an upgrade of that. We at the Piramal Foundation are working with the bottom quartile of India. Okay? Largely the top quartile is sitting in this room and driving the growth. The next quartile sort of supports that growth by being drivers, electricians, plumbers. The next quartile is just about surviving. And the fourth quartile, honestly, first of all, you have to tune into to even understand how badly off there are. There are still, as per official statistics, over 200 million people in India in poverty, right? So the areas where we focus, which are the 5 eastern states, for example, I mean, so when you're talking about productivity deficit, I'll give you a few statistics, right? Because we're imagining this is a plumber who's coming into my house, and how do I increase this thing? But what about the women? 50% of India is women, right? And the states where we work with, Jharkhand, Assam, Chhattisgarh, Orissa, Bihar, these states today, the number is at 36% of women getting married below the age of 18. What is going to be my productivity gap? I got married before the age of 18. My productivity is measured by how fast I produce the first child and the second child. And all my energy is going into just taking care of children. What is AI going to do for this girl who by the age of 20 has 2 children and at home? Right? What is it going to do for the tribal who's still in the Dandakaranya forest in South Chhattisgarh? So that group of people has lower growth rate than the median of India. As it is, they were lower, and they have lower growth rate. So really increasing productivity for that group, I think, is going to be key, because it's not about taking the top quartile to $29,000, right? That is going to happen, or it's going to happen because there are automatic mechanisms in place in the market to incentivize that productivity gain. The bottom quartile is not yet plugged into the market, right? These are the 70 million people who are in poverty in these 5 states. Out of them, the statistic is not having, 40% of those families don't have even one person who has had 6 years of education in the family. 6 years, we're not talking about 10th standard. So a lot of our programs are designed on, okay, 10th standard kiya, uske baad you're going to do ITI, you're going to do this thing. So this bottom quartile really needs, I think productivity gains are going to come by us understanding why the bottom quartile is not involved in the market, and what do we need to do 3 times, 4 times as hard so that they're not pulling the median of India down.
I mean, and as consultants, when we look at these reports, and I can tell you from the Niti one was, I think these kind of inputs, because it's very easy sometimes just to be far off and sort of give recommendation, but when you realize the nitty-gritties as well, I think you realize that there have to be different solutions, and I think this report was where really different sets of people came together to contribute. Arundhati, back to you in terms of, we created this persona-led, the carpenter, the cultivator, and we chose this because challenges differ, right? So cultivators face sort of volatility and information gaps, artisan face sort of market access, middleman dependence, textile workers face skills and technology gaps, and trade workers, of course, face income insecurity, migration, of course, pressures as well. So how do you balance a centralized approach while ensuring each person's unique challenge are solved for?
So basically, again, there cannot be a cookie cutter solution to all of this. Because the persuasions are so different, the challenges are so different, you necessarily need to solve for people in different ways. There are certain fundamental issues that bother all of these, whether it's a issue of access, issue of health, issue of basic understanding and literacy. These are all basic issues that need to get fixed at a very low level, in the sense at a very early level in their lives. But if you are looking beyond that, and if you are looking at vertical wise the different kinds of people and the different ecosystems that they work for, you necessarily will have to come up with different solutions. And again, here I think this is where the stakeholder, which is the major stakeholder, which is the government has a role to play, because it is the government that is going to enable the ecosystem to help these people to grow. For them to grow on their own, like was being said by him, the upper quartile people can help themselves. The people who are absolutely at the lower quartile, they actually need help. And I remember one incident where, we used to run this Youth for India program in State Bank of India, where we had people taking a gap year, coming and serving in the villages. Now, one such guy was serving in one of these villages of Dang tribals who work with bamboo. And he discovered that the equipments that they were working the bamboo with were basically Stone Age equipments. Literally Stone Age equipments. Now, just by changing the nature of the equipments that they were working with, and again, nothing very fancy, nothing with technology or AI, but just changing those equipments improved the quality of the product so much that it had a much better purchase in the market. So, solutions may be something that's very simple, but it is something that has to be innovated there by actually getting knowledge of what really is holding them back. So I think, again, this is something that needs a lot of work, and it needs a lot of work by people at that place, which again has to be partly the government.
And in fact, the platform that the committee recommended, in some sense, was to also help to Uberize, to create demand, to also build skills also. So as long as you have a simple phone, you could actually use it. So I think that was actually done as well. So Manisha, coming to the sort of the startup ecosystem, and and obviously Maharashtra has been doing phenomenally well in the startup ecosystem. So could you share how you're driving societal impact through this startup ecosystem?
I think honestly, startup ecosystem is something that is organically grown, and government should not be taken too much credit. I was just sharing with Arundhati ji with you before, and we were entering that some things are on autopilot, and government should just catalyze or facilitate and not obstruct the growth. I think that is. But nevertheless, I would like to say that we have been trying from the government, Maharashtra government side, to really kind of catalyze this ecosystem which is there in Maharashtra. Maharashtra has 35,000, nearly 35,000 startups currently registered by DPIIT, and it is the leading state. And some of the things that we have been doing actually is to create this, get this culture penetrated across the state. Initially, we saw that their startups were primarily centered around Mumbai because of the ecosystem and Pune. But today, I'm happy to share that every district in Maharashtra, including Gadchiroli, has minimum of 25 startups registered. So can you imagine that? So we've tried to do it through multiple ways, like having hackathons, grand challenges, startup yatras, involving the college students and the rural areas as much, creating district level committees, led by collector, but having an entire ecosystem of stakeholders, including principals, ITIs, the district industries officers, the MSME clusters. Then we also give some support of financial, because not all startups are capable of prototyping and then getting the quality testing done. So we do some reimbursement for IPR, for domestic patents or international patents. We are helping them to obtain quality testing and certification. But a very unique experiment that we have done, I think, and which we can take genuine credit of, is our very unique program called Startup Week. We invite startups from across the country. We get nearly close to 3,000 entries every year. And they are shortlisted by an independent jury of domain experts, VCs. And then we have their pitching done before a second round of independent jury. Now, these are not startups. We are looking at startups and their technologies and innovations which have a large social impact. So just to give you an example, the sectors are actually clean energy, mobility, agriculture, health, education, fintech. These are the kind of sectors. So I'm happy to share some examples, like there was a startup, and then we give them as awards, direct work orders up to 25 lakhs. In recently, we have increased from 15 to 25. So otherwise, startups are stuck for procurement policies of the government. They are not able to compete with the tender systems that are there. So we give them a direct work orders as winning prize. And then we connect them with the domain departments to roll out their innovations. And that has been very helpful for our startups to gain visibility and even gain international markets and investors. So some of our startups have really grown up, like there's Sagar Defense. Now today it's called Sagar Defense. We started with their, now today their technology has been upgraded for marine surveillance, and Indian Navy has also placed orders and they've created a manufacturing plant near Nasik. We have New Docs recently. It was our winner from IIT and other people who have created a very beautiful, home diagnostic app. On phone, you can have more than 30 health parameters at a very low cost. We have Pad Care, which has done the entire thing of menstrual hygiene management and disposal of sanitary pads in a sustainable way. We did their pilots in Mantralaya itself to do the, see the proof of concept and give them the work order. So we have, I think it is New Motors, I remember, very interesting for physically challenged people, that their wheelchair converts into a battery-operated two-wheeler when it for the disabled person. So I can cite lot of examples, and I would say even in the areas of agriculture and clean energy. So these are kind of some efforts that we have been doing, and hopefully we'll take it to the next level with the help of such experts.
I think it's fantastic work. And on a lighter note, of course, Manisha ji, we also struggle on the tender side. So, so maybe Aditya.
It's a skill in itself.
So Aditya, I mean, from your experiences, where do digital or sort of AI-led interventions for the informal force sort of break down, and what are some of the learnings from the past? So like you said, you bucketed into the four categories as well.
So we've done a lot of digitization work. In fact, we've showcased it even at the expo, and we work with the government to digitize government health systems, digitize government education systems, agri, water, any space. Digitization normally adds value. But here, when we are talking about the informal labor force, I think we have to look at the mental model here. When we are talking about white-collar workers, right, like Deloitte or a lawyer firm, they got aggregated more than 40, 50 years ago, right? If you went back 100 years ago, you had an individual chartered accountant, an individual lawyer, an individual banker, or an individual consultant. Now you have firms. Now, as soon as you've aggregated, you get lots of benefits because you get specialization, and then you can reintegrate to offer a more complex service, right? Or you get more skill capability growth for each person. You can get quality standards. The customer knows what he's buying, right? So in the white-collar workforce, this has already happened. In the blue-collar workforce, on the other hand, tell me where you will go for quality of electrician, right? You'll end up asking your neighbors, हाँ वो अच्छा करता है लेकिन वो आता नहीं है. What about a carpenter, tailor? हाँ वो blouse अच्छा सिखाने मतलब मैं आपको भेजता हूँ. Right? We've not yet organized the blue-collar workforce in a way in which the customer can choose quality predictably, right? As an urban consumer, I will face more than 80 brands a day. Even my salt is branded, it's Catch. You walk into a village today, nothing is branded, right? तो उस माझी के पास जाओ, वहाँ पे हींग अच्छी मिलती है. So the need to aggregate is very critical to improve quality of service. And this is what we tried with our farmer produce organizations in order they could improve. But if you see, there are multiple models for this aggregation, right? You can have the Fab India type model, right? The Fab Indias and the type model where it's a private sector. Fab India, High Design. High Designs helped the entire supply chain in leather. Fab India helped in the entire textile supply chain, right? You can go in that private sector type model. The second model is that you can actually go in the Amul and the Seva model, which the firm itself is owned by the farmers. Today, when I buy Amul milk, 90% of what I pay goes back to the farmer, right? When you buy Nestle milk, it doesn't go back to the farmer. So when you buy Seva, when you buy Lijjat Papad, 90% is going back to the last person because it's organized as a cooperative. And the third is then you've got the urban clap model, right? Which is saying, okay, I will certify the person and he's got a 4.5 rating, so therefore you choose him. You choose this physiotherapist, you choose this carpenter, you choose this plumber. All these are aggregating in different ways and distributing incentives in different ways. I think unless we think of, but for the artisan who's 45 years old and doing a traditional kalamkari, you're expecting that someone's going to come and choose this particular piece without having branded that as a whole. I think actually his productivity is quite high. The problem is his realizations are not that high. What he's able to realize from the market is not as great as the actual craft. His actual understanding of where the design market is going in Paris or in New York or in Delhi is not as high in order to adapt his designs. And so the constraints, I think, is about aggregation of these workers, which is why I think the government's main program of NRLM, the National Rural Livelihood Mission, and the SRLM, which is, of course, very, very powerful in Maharashtra, Bihar, I think is extremely critical for aggregating workers at various levels in order that then you can improve quality, deploy technology, create incentives, create a common expectation of quality. Because otherwise, as a consumer, I'm not going to be willing to pay unless I'm sure of a certain quality level.
So I have a last question to each of you. So what I'll request is maybe just a minute or two, quick one. So Arundhati, as part of the study, if you remember, we met about 70 personas. We had 70 stories, we had 70 different aspirations. But they all represent a 490 million workforce, 90% of the country's workforce. These are numbers, I believe these are numbers, but I believe the stories matter actually more. And as a reflection, if you could share a persona which stuck with you the most during our exercise.
Well, one of the personas I think that stuck with me quite a lot was the hospitality sector. Now, that's a sector that's doing really well across India and across the world. And yet, it's a sector where we really haven't done anything very much, especially for the segment that is below the tier 1 cities. Whether you talk about the level of service, whether you talk about hygiene, whether you talk about the way that India tells its stories. And there are so many stories that India can tell, because this is a civilization that is 5,000 years old, and there are so many things that you can showcase over here. You have nature, you have the mountains, you have the seas, you have culture, you have temples, you have old structures. Like, you ask for it and it is there. And yet this is one sector where we really haven't done well. And it's very difficult to understand why. People in countries with far, far less are doing much, much better. And this also is a very labor-intensive sector. We talk about people not having enough jobs, and why not? Because this is a sector that can provide a lot of jobs. There are so many wonders in this country which we ourselves as Indians have not witnessed. Okay? And this, I think, is something that the government needs to take up on a really urgent footing, because not everything is going to happen on from the private side. But of course, the private sector coming in over here in full force, along with the government, should actually mean a great deal to us, because this is also not going to be something that is not going to give us foreign exchange. It will give us foreign exchange. It will give us enough amount of employment. And more than anything else, I think, it will showcase what India is all about, which I think is very important. So if you ask me, that was one place that I thought, we could do a separate study just on that, to see whether we could do something more for that particular segment.
And I can tell you she was as passionate then also. I remember this discussion as well, specifically, but it is a fact that hospitality tourism actually is a force multiplier, because it also impacts so many industries, right? So, Manisha, in terms of industry partnerships, so really when it comes to employment, an important ally is industry partnership. What special efforts are there to sort of deepen collaboration between industry, and the government for societal impact? A quick.
Okay, before I go to industry, I just quickly wanted to respond, because I remembered I was few years ago tribal department secretary, and we used to have a small fund called Nucleus Budget Fund, which was untied. We could do some locally contextualized responses. So I do remember one of my department officers saying कि मैम मुझे tribal areas में homestays बनाने हैं. And beyond Nasik, there's Bhandardara Falls and area, and there is fireflies. There is a cluster of tribal villages which have got these fireflies before the monsoon sets in. It's a beautiful site. I would ask some of you to explore if you haven't. And then so I funded that time few homestays, which was just 1 lakh rupee for villagers to make some extra room and furnish it with iron furniture, 1 bed and mattress and something. They couldn't even afford that, because they were all small marginal farmers. And I forgot about it, and I did it out of the way, because there was no such scheme, but I designed it for them because I trusted my officer that he'll use it well. And then he said, "Ma'am, aap aana, wo log acha business kar rahe hain." And 3 years ago, I had left the department few years ago, and I traveled to Bhandardara area to catch this fireflies. And he said, "Ma'am, वो आपको याद कर रहे हैं कि आप उनके घर आके खाना खाना." So around from 11 at night till 2 in the morning, I was looking at that tract of fireflies, and then I visited that village hamlet. She cooked that jwari, bhakri and everything, and she was so happy to share with me, the lady of the house, कि मॅम ये वाला कमरा है, आपण पाहुण्यासाठी घेतो आम्ही, महाराष्ट्रीयन जेवण त्यांना देतो, मतलब we are giving authentic Maharashtra food, and lot of people come and stay in my room. So one example, I just got some warm remembrances. And I'm sure there are so many efforts that are happening, but as ma'am was saying, we have so much to do in terms of aggregation, a systematic kind of approach to kind of tap the potential of tourism as well as our rich culture and diversity that we have. Coming quickly to industry, we've created, industry has a major role, because we keep talking about industry aligned courses, matchmaking for the job seeker and job provider, but it is our industries which are the job providers, whether it is small scale industries, MSMEs, or they are big industry associations or service sector. So what we have done is actually to modernize curriculum of our ITIs. We have started, we have created a PPP policy, public-private partnership, in which we are ensuring that if an industry-led anchor partner is there, we will give our ITI management to the industry for 10 years or 20 years. And we will give them freedom to design curriculum, to have expert faculty, and even converge our resources. This is something that Maharashtra did before. Recently, Government of India has also announced PM Setu scheme, which is akin to this kind of concept of developing ITIs along with industry partnership. But on a regular basis also, we are trying to tap industry expertise for OJT on the job training, apprenticeship programs, advising our institutions, academic institutions. Another good example I would just like to share, because it's a recent one. We have introduced short-term training courses and opened the ITI to non-ITI students in the evening for optimal utilization. So in the evenings and on, we can have short-term skilling programs. We are looking for partnerships. One good partnership we have done is with Mahindra Tractors in Gadchiroli for tribal students again. And we've done the first batch of certification in Mahindra Tractors technology, and with 100% placement in Gadchiroli. So some things like these, I can give you examples of industry partnerships.
Thank you, Manisha. Aditya, final
But
question.
one line, this is not enough. These are, we really need industry to engage very deeply. There are structural kind of issues that we are really open to partnerships, but I think industry needs to come forward.
Aditya, final question to you. Of course, the Piramal Foundation has really deep experience in community-led development, the last mile governance, and of course, behavioral change. In your view, what behavioral change levers are the most critical to sort of unlock adoption and also trust amongst the informal workers?
You're asking a question about which we spend all our time on, and I'm going to try and summarize it in 2 minutes. Let me give you an example of a very basic technology, right? Government of India has a huge national digitization program for healthcare workers. There are over 1 million ASHA workers in India who are the last mile delivery for all health services. An ASHA worker still in many states has a manual register in which she fills up the pregnancies. She has 54 different things to track. She has a separate register for pregnancies, separate register for TB, separate register for nutrition, separate register for adolescent girls. In most states, that was not yet. Now you'd imagine, come on, that's like the easiest thing to automate, right? Because it's a tool, she goes to each home, there's a geotagging, and then you have the database, and then you fill up what's the latest problem, so that her surveys are more efficient. Bihar alone, and we went into Bihar to try to digitize this, and Bihar alone has over 100,000 ASHA workers, right? And we thought, hey, ye to 3 mahine mein ho jayega, because we had the technology. The point is the technology adoption is a separate skill from the technology, right? And when you think of technology adoption, again, we are thinking of the white-collar person in this room. When we saw the people who had to adopt this, we saw that they were in 4 categories. Category 1 is people who are over 50, okay, and have never used any technology. She's not even used a dumb phone. Now suddenly you're asking her on the smartphone to collect her wage. She's saying, "Bitiya ko de do, wo kar degi." Okay? So we have to remember that there are people who are 50 to 75 and they're in the government workforce as ASHA workers, right? So there's a people who don't even have dumb phone. That's about a quartile. The second quartile is people who still have a dumb phone and not a smartphone. So they use it for call. Call ke alawa, not even SMS. You use it for call and you use it for emergency. You're not using it for work. You're not used to how will you use it for work? When I press here, what happens? Where does it go? How does that data come back here? Who's looking at it? These are all the questions going in their mind because which is saying वहाँ पे नहीं बताएंगे आपको आके ऑफिस में बता देते हैं. यहाँ पे भी जब मैं लिखता हूँ तो पता तो चलता है कि ये रजिस्टर मेरे पास है. यहाँ पे लिख दिया तो होगा नहीं तो फिर बाद में अफसर पूछेंगे मुझे. So there is a huge fear of this technology adoption. Then there's a third quartile which has smartphones but is not used to using it for business, right? That is used for, my son watches YouTube, I have Prime Video, all those sort of things. But using it for business, business means whatever work I'm doing, you're not used to because gaon mein waisa hota nahi. And then the top one is typically younger people who are, young ASHA workers from 25 to 35 who have a smartphone, who are going out, who are also selling something on the side, also running some side business. They're really smart. So the adoption depends on the profile of the workers inside and how far they have adopted. And typically we design one-size-fits-all type programs, and there's a group of people who already knew how to do it, and there's a group of people who's never going to do it. And I think this is very critical to really imagine that there is not one India, there are at least 4 Indias on any dimension. And to first understand that and then tailor our programs to that, I think all adoption can happen.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is, you can see the wealth of experience, the depth of knowledge, and the willingness to work. You can clearly see from industry, from the development sector, from the government. So I think sometimes we feel a bit disheartened but whenever we hear stories and if we see leaders like this, that India is in good hands. So thank you everyone for such a wonderful panel. Thank you for your time. Thank you.